I want to share with you guys what's on my heart, what God's been speaking to me, and I really hope that it can encourage you and minister to you guys today. How many of you guys have ever gone through a hard situation, a season even, of a difficult time? And what comes to mind in history for me is World War II, when the Jews were in the ghettos and stuff, and all that time. It's a long time of just depression and bad situations and stress, and it's hard. It's hard to handle. It's hard to deal with. The sad thing is that wasn't the first time that the Jewish people had to deal with that. If you go back into history, King Solomon sinned, and God knew he had to do something about it. So at about 931 BC, he split the kingdom into two kingdoms, north and south. King Solomon lost the kingdom. And sin, sadly, still even after that, continued to run rampant. So God came back again. And at 722 BC, the Assyrians captured the north. Going even further, at 586, the Babylonians captured the south. In 539 BC, keep going further, this is years that they're still in bondage. The Medes and the Persians conquered the Babylonians and the Jews. And the Jews were finally freed and released to go back home. In 458 BC, Ezra leads another group of people into exile into Jerusalem. And they rebuild the temple so they have a place to worship God again. 14 years later, 487 years of stressful bondage time, we come to Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah, for me, that's my go-to book. If I don't know what to read, that's where I go. It's just a great story there. I get stuff out of it every time when I read it. There's something new, a new nugget to pull from that. And I think the other thing that really pulls me with Nehemiah is it really hits home for me. I grew up and I went to school for radio, TV, and film. I'm a movie guy. I just, movies, TV shows, if you heard me before, I love the stuff. When I read the first chapter of Nehemiah, I see a movie trailer playing in my head. So I'm going to try to relay that to you. So I want you guys to picture with me as I go through some of the verses and give you some descriptions of what plays in my head. And you can understand how my wife really goes crazy because of the stuff that goes in my head. So here we go. So picture, if you will, the orchestra comes up. You hear the strings playing, drums, little toms kind of playing a little bit. Suddenly you see a kingdom. And then bang, flash to a man talking. In the month of Chislev, in the 20th year. Flashes of a city in ruin. Rubble, destruction, gates torn down. The survivors there in the province who escaped captivity are in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. A kid stands in the middle of a street of rubble all around him. Cut to a man on his knees, side profile, praying. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. Flashes of men on horses, armies lining up around a wall partially built, and fearful men looking out from the cracks of the walls. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, men behind the wall with weapons, a man standing in front of a crowd, shouts of men with weapons raised high. Though your outcasts are under the farthest skies, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place at which I have chosen to establish my name. The music stops. You see a man stand up from prayer while he says these words. O Lord, let your ear be attentive. Give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. A picture of a king on his throne. You see that same humble man walking up, holding a cup, eyes on fire with determination as he says, my name is Nehemiah. I was cupbearer to the king. Blackout, Nehemiah, stone font. That's an epic. I mean, come on. Is that an epic movie right there? In its basic sense, Nehemiah is a story about an average man who had a passion and a vision to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. That's the overall story. Now, why were the walls so important? In those days, there was no airstrikes, there was no paratroopers, there was nothing coming from above. Your attack came horizontally, straight at you. So a wall was your first line of defense. Now, Jerusalem's walls in those days spanned about 4.5 miles, surrounding 960 acres of land. The walls, on average, were 8 feet thick and 40 feet tall. Now, when I did the math, that equals around 190,080 square foot. Inside the walls, you felt safe. Inside the walls, you felt secure. So Nehemiah's job was a cupbearer. It was a high-ranking position in the king, but I don't think people were chafing at the bit to get this job as much as it was high esteemed. Your main job, your main accomplishment to do was to drink the king's cup first. If you didn't die, then the king could enjoy his drink. Depends, I guess, on how good the king was, whether or not there was a lot of issues about whether that was a dangerous job or not. But it wasn't an easy job. There was added stress to it. It had drawbacks. Now, from studying Nehemiah, he was an average man doing an average job. But his success that you read is amazing. He did the insurmountable by building the walls of Jerusalem. And I was trying to find out how. Why? How could he do it? I found his superpower. I found his secret weapon in his book. Anybody got any guesses what it is? Nehemiah prayed. Nehemiah prayed. To the point, it is mentioned so much in the point, it's the dominant theme, I believe, in Nehemiah. It has 13 recorded prayers in a 13-chapter book. Now, granted, one of those chapters is just name and name. So, on average, over one prayer a chapter is in there. Its longest prayer, which is the longest prayer in the Bible, is found in Nehemiah chapter 9. So it holds a record. And it actually ends on a prayer, like a period on a statement. So I'm going to jump back to chapter 1. Nehemiah is serving the king as cupbearer. And his brother, Hananiah, comes to visit. And of course, when friends come to visit, family comes, you want to know, how's things at home? How's everything going? Hananiah tells him, everything's not good, man. We're free, we're there, but the walls are torn down. The gates are destroyed. We were in bondage 14 years ago, and there's nothing stopping it from happening again. Everybody's living in fear. We have no defense. Now, if you're a man like me, or a woman, doesn't matter, if you're a person, and you hear stressful, bad news, you've got a go-to reaction. Me? Chocolate, peanut buttery goodness. Give me anything, whether it be ice cream or Reese's, something with that. If I can't find any of that, generally there's an Intimates on sale somewhere in ShopRite or Wawa, those cake crumb ones. And it doesn't really serve me well going out, but coming in, Taco Bell is a good comfort food for me. So, my dad, when he had his issues, when he got stressed out, he would go into the back room and smoke. My mom would clean. We all have a reflex action. We all have a go-to response. What amazes me is what Nehemiah's go-to response was. It wasn't to eat his troubles away. It wasn't to go get a smoke. It wasn't to run and complain and stamp his feet and say everything wasn't fair. It wasn't even to just take flight and take action like Superman would. His gut reaction, his go-to response is found in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 4. It says, "When I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, fasting and praying before the God of heaven." Our go-to response should be prayer. Amen? In the Bible, prayer raised people from the dead. In the Bible, prayer parted the Red Sea and sent manna from heaven. Prayer crushed the Philistines at the hands of Samson. Prayer called fire down from heaven for an altar on Mount Carmel. And prayer gave Jesus the strength to die on the cross for each and every one of our sins. Can you say amen? Amen. Now, I had a situation where I had to pray for something, and I still remember it to this day. And Tracy doesn't know, but she's involved in this, and so is Tom. But I was just friends with Rachel. And we were reading the Bible, because Rachel said she needed to learn how to get a habit of reading the Bible, and I figured, well, it takes 30 days to get a habit, and that's 30 days of conversation I can have with her, so I'll take that. So we were reading our Bible, and Tom, who was fairly new to the church, he had heard about the Samaritan's Purse mission trip going down to New Orleans, and he wanted to go, but he didn't know many people. And I said, well, I'll go with you. And so we went down there, and the first day I tried and looked around and found a little quiet area where I could call Rachel to have a little conversation, a little Bible study. And we read, I think we were reading Peter at the time. And we finished reading our Bible, had a little small talk, and then we started doing something that we didn't do before. We started saying we missed each other. Oh, I miss you. Oh, I miss you too. I miss you. We talked on the phone before. We talk on the phone now. It was just because there was distance and gap. It didn't mean anything, but something was happening. And Rachel, actually, she's the one that actually stood up in the conversation and said, hold up, things might be going a little fast here. This is a little, I don't know why we're saying this. And I said, you're right, tear. I said, why don't we do this? Let's pray, and let's see if God gives us a green light. But let's fast. She goes, fast? I said, let's fast each other. Let's not talk to each other. Let's not call and do our Bible study. We'll read, and we'll talk about it when we get back. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. And Tom, thank you for making fun of me every day about it. But we got the green light. We came back. We both prayed and fasted. We felt really good. And if I had not taken that time to pray and fast, I would have missed out on so many blessings that God had planned for me. If I had just listened to her saying we need to step back, if I stepped back, I would have lost everything. But we prayed and we listened to God. And we continue to make family decisions that way. So let's go back to Nehemiah. He hears the news, and his first reaction is to what? Pray. Pray and fast. Now on page, it looks like, when you read it, you go from chapter 1 to chapter 2, it looks like the very next day he's in the king's courts and there's an answer to everything. In fact, it took 4 months of praying and fasting for God to open the doors. What's the longest amount of time you've spent praying for anything? I typically would say it's in our nature to give up on prayer before it's fitting because it's not on our timetable. Now, I'm sure that there are some times we take long prayers for things, but in the general amount of our prayers, when they don't fit our timetable, we're done. Let's move on. Let's take action. We try to handle it ourselves. We roll up our sleeves and we're like, all right, God, I got it from here. How many of you have ever done the whole, if I don't hear anything, I'm going to take that as a yes? We think it's better to get forgiveness from God than permission. But when you pray, you should pray until you get an answer from God. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Someone asked Smith Wigglesworth how often he prayed. Smith thought about it and he said, I don't often spend more than a half an hour in prayer at a time. That's doable. Then he thought a little bit more and he said, but I never go more than a half an hour without praying. Now, although this quote wasn't around in Nehemiah's time, I believe Nehemiah based his actions on that. He prayed continually. He not only prayed and fasted, but he did it for days, for weeks, for months. So 4 months go by, and finally there's a private dinner with the king and queen. Now, the king notices now, because there's not a lot of crowd, the king notices that Nehemiah looks a little upset or sad. It's either that, it's a little unclear in the Bible. It might have been that the queen was there and she kind of gave the king a little elbow and said, look, there's something going on with this guy, and if he's off his game, you might be off your game, if you know what I'm saying. So the king asks. Now, if the king asks you a question, you answer. So the king says, what's up? What's going on? Why is your face downcast? And Nehemiah tells him everything. He tells about Jerusalem, about the walls, and what he needs to do. So the king said to me, what do you request? Chapter 2, verse 4. The king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. Then I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor with you, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my ancestors' grave, so that I may rebuild it. Notice, even after he prayed and fasted for 4 months, he prays again. Just a quick prayer. I remember when my dad was still alive. My dad was getting sick on his deathbed, and he was not doing well. And I was getting ready to get my gold medal of achievement. It's in Royal Rangers, which is a Christian organization of like Boy Scouts. It's the highest medal. It's the Eagle Scout. And I was getting the medal for it. And it was that Saturday night before getting it. And I went downstairs to give my dad a hug and a kiss and stuff, and he looked horrible. He had jaundice color. He was having trouble breathing. You could see, you can see sickness on somebody. Like, he just looked like he was in pain and in sickness. And he looked at me and he said, I don't think I'm going to make it tomorrow. I'm feeling horrible. I'm really sorry. I want to be there. I said, Dad, I understand. So I did what any normal teenager would do. I went upstairs. I jumped onto my bed, grabbed my pillow, and cried my eyes out. I said one sentence that put me to sleep. I said, Lord, you need to do something. I'd been praying for years for my dad to come back to the Lord, to be whole again with Jesus. So I just ended that last thing. Do something. So I woke up, came down the stairs in my Royal Ranger outfit, and there was my dad standing, buttoning his t-shirt or dress shirt, with color on, looked like he hadn't even been sick, hadn't even had any problems. The only reason you could tell he was sick is that he had an oxygen mask that he wore, that was it. And he was able to come and make it to church. Now that capstone prayer helped, but it was from years of praying that we can then add that on. Nehemiah's first response was to pray. Nehemiah wanted every choice, every word to come from God and to have God lead the way. So the king asked, what do you want? And he prayed. Now it had to be quick. I can't imagine you leaving the king for a long period of time. If the king asks you a question, you don't pause, say, give me 10 minutes, I need to go and pray. He said a quick prayer, probably under his breath. And then he waited. Now, I want to go back to on those quick prayers. See, the problem with those quick prayers is we tend to only pray like that. That seems to be our prayer life, is quick prayers. The situation comes, and, oh, God, we need you. It's like knowing you have to eat, and then waiting and waiting and waiting until you're dying of starvation, and finally ask somebody for a piece of food. Or it's like having an infection, and waiting and waiting and waiting to go to the doctor until you've got to crawl to the emergency room to ask for help. Or like just ignoring your lawn till it gets 4 or 5 feet tall and then asking someone to come and mow it. All those scenarios will work. It won't be pretty. It'll be harder. See, we've redefined what it means to pray instead of following the biblical principles. We use prayer as in case of emergency, break the glass and use it. It should be our go-to response. So Nehemiah says a quick prayer. The king hears Nehemiah's request after he says it, and he grants every single one. Now, this isn't like a small order. I mean, he asked for protection. He asked for supplies, for time away from his job, which, how are you going to get another cupbearer that quickly? He asked for money. Every single thing the king gave him. So with the king's full support and permission, Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. Now, if I got permission on full funding to go and do whatever was on my heart and my vision, my hope and dreams to do, as soon as I got to that place, I want to dive right in and get my hands dirty. Let's just go in, let's do it. That's the sign, isn't it, right there? Let's just dive in and do it. What does Nehemiah do? Nehemiah 2, verse 14. So I came to Jerusalem and was there for 3 days. So I went up by way of the valley by night and inspected the wall. Then I turned back and entered by the valley gate and so returned. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest that were to do the work. Now it's safe to presume Nehemiah gets there, and without telling anybody his plan or what he's doing, he goes to inspect the wall. Now while he's inspecting the wall, what do you think he's doing? He's praying. He's praying and planning. Before he even tells people, he's got to tell thousands of people what one man wants to do, which is rebuild a huge wall. Don't jump into that without prayer. See, Nehemiah consistently prayed and then acted. even to the point of when opposition comes. And I think that's one of our major setbacks, is once we hit a roadblock, once opposition comes, then that's when we need to change gears and do it our own way. Oh, it's not working. There's an opposition. If I was praying and God was answering it, then it should have just been a clear highway. Nehemiah had opposition in the worst sense. In Nehemiah chapter 4, he's already told the people that he's going to rebuild the wall, and he gets thousands of people on board to do this. Then you have Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites. 4 or 5 different factions here that somebody's trying to rebuild the walls, and they don't like it. They get mad. So they decide they're going to kill Jerusalem. They're going to stop this. Because of prayer, God reveals to Nehemiah what the plans are. Verse 9 of chapter 4 says this, after Nehemiah finds out what's going on. It says, "So we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night." Jump into verse 15. "When our enemies heard that their plot was known to us and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to his work." Through prayer, God gave Nehemiah a plan of action. He didn't even freak out. You read it, and it doesn't even seem that he skips a beat. He hears about the news, he prays, and then he acts. That was Nehemiah's paradigm. That's what he did. He would pray, and then he would act. He would pray, and then he would act. In all things, he would pray, and then act. Only through prayer could Nehemiah have gotten the wisdom to rebuild the walls and to protect Jerusalem. And it's only through prayer that Nehemiah could go from a cupbearer to a governor. Only through prayer could the know-how and the willpower to rebuild the walls and the gates of Jerusalem, 4.5 miles of wall, 8 feet thick, 40 foot high, completed in 52 days. Think about that. Remember, the square footage I said, that Jerusalem's walls were 190,080 square feet. An average Walmart is 102,000 square feet. So it's half the size, and Walmarts build them in a year with modern technology and without opposition like Nehemiah had. 52 days. That only happens through prayer. Now, here's the kicker. This is what I like about the whole thing, because he's been praying this whole time. All the funding, all the supplies, all the support, it came from an enemy of Jerusalem. We pray, and then we stop praying because we don't think that God can come up with the answers or the supplies because of the scenario. It doesn't matter where God provides the answer from. He will provide it. It will come. He will provide. We just need to pray until it happens. So think about this. What if we changed? What if we changed our prayer pattern, our thought pattern, our go-to response? If we saw it as our plan of action, when something comes our way, we pray and then we act. Each and every one of us are as average and normal as Nehemiah was. And we can each do and rise to the challenge and do amazing things just like Nehemiah did. There was nothing fancy about Nehemiah except that he was a man who prayed and then acted. Now we're coming to the end of our year, and this is something, again, for 15 years here at Victory, we have always done this on January, sometimes at different lengths in different ways, but we've always felt led to bring in the new year through prayer. And I want to challenge you guys to change your pattern of prayer in 2015. Nehemiah was an ordinary man that did extraordinary things through prayer. You say, that's great. So how do I do it? Give me a plan. Give me something. Fasting and praying really doesn't sound easy. And after you told me that Smith Wigglesworth quote about praying nonstop, it's really hard too. I still watch The Biggest Loser. And they have a thing on there, commercials that come up called The More You Know. You guys have ever seen those? Sometimes it's on recycling, reusing things. And they had one that was on exercise. It was like, the more you know, if you take your commercial and you do some jumping jacks or some sit-ups or push-ups, you'll get some exercising in and still get to enjoy your TV and stuff, and so you're not really being a couch potato. The more you know. What if we changed it from exercise and we actually changed that to a prayer time? Taking the commercial time. You can still get up and get your drink, you can still go to the bathroom, but just take those commercial times to pray. An average 30-minute sitcom or news channel yields 8 minutes of commercials. A 60-minute show, about 16 minutes of commercials. I guarantee you, you may not want to admit it or not, but we all have a show we watch each week, more than likely each night. The news counts. So what would happen if you just took that time and prayed? You know, if you did it for an hour show, 16 minutes is more than 10% of an hour. And so you're tithing more of your time to God in prayer. You say, I don't know how to pray. I tell this to everybody that asks me this. How do I pray? Take a chair, put it into a secluded place, close your bedroom or whatnot, and look at that chair and imagine Jesus sitting on that chair. And then you talk to him like you would your best friend. You don't have to have these and thous in a King James Version tongue. Very often, if you hear me pray, I stumble on my words. Thank God he knows my heart. But that's all it takes. He's your friend. He just wants to hear you talk to him. Another way to learn how to pray a little bit more, if you want to go deeper, once you got that down, come to Friday night prayers. We meet at the Olivet Church at 7 o'clock every Friday night. It's amazing times of prayer. You can come and just listen and just soak in the Spirit and pray silently, or you can begin praying out loud. It doesn't matter. It's a great way to boost your prayer life. We have a thing called the prayer table. It's our online prayer chain. Sign up for it if you haven't already. There's a link to our website where you can go and get to that. On it, you can post a prayer you have, and people will pray. They'll click, and literally you can see the numbers rise of people praying for your request. You can also go in there and click and pray for other people's requests. You can post praises when God answers the prayers that you've been praying. It's a great way to integrate the body of Christ into a heart of prayer, which is a core value here at Victory. Now again, we are coming into our 21 days of prayer and fasting. I would encourage you all to fast something. As Pastor said, it's generally a meal, it's generally food. Try a meal a day, try a meal a week. Or your favorite food. I one time did coffee. It was, again, one of the hardest things. Not the hardest thing, but one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. You could do a Daniel's fast. And again, there's information that's going to be on our website for that. Today's generation gives other opportunities too, I feel. And on top of that, if you want to fast games or TV shows or movies, fast your favorite activity. But what you need to do is take whatever that is, that time, and give it to God. It doesn't mean just say, oh, well, it was me, I'm not eating today for lunch. You take that time and you pray to God. You take that time and you build your prayer pattern. Ultimately, you need to ask God what he's requiring of you for this prayer and fasting. We'll have plenty of prayer meetings throughout the month of prayer and fasting. They're in the bulletin. There'll probably be more rising up. I challenge you to go to at least one, but go to as many as you can to get your prayer pattern going. Now, again, we're scheduled to begin this on January 5th. Why wait? This is something we need to take action to. So this is clearly something just like Nehemiah. This is an action that has to be done. So if we're following with what Nehemiah said, what's our first response that we should do now? Pray. So I want to invite you to the altars today to begin a paradigm shift in South Jersey here. Imagine what could happen if in all of your decision-making you brought it through prayer and then action. If you read through Nehemiah, we only did the first couple chapters. If you read through Nehemiah, there is success after success after success. And you'll see the shifting, the pattern is the same. It is pray, then act. Pray, then act.